I was just doing my FreeCodeCamp course, and I got to a point in the JavaScript section. It was called Profile Lookup, and I was doing good until I got to this point. Sorry, somebody just walked in my room. I got to a point where I just didn't know what I was doing. This code right here is very complicated, at least to me, a beginner with JavaScript. I know it's really close to Java, but I don't know, it was hard for me to understand. And it took me a while to kind of get the solution, and so I thought I would share how I actually came up with the solution. Honestly, once I figured it out, it was pretty simple, but it kind of just takes a lot of thinking. And I guess I should start by going over what the whole challenge was. So they have this thing where you have an array of objects, and each object contains properties and values. That's pretty straightforward. Each object contains a number of different properties, and what my goal was to do is to create a solution for a contact, which means something that will test for a function's input or arguments, and it will see if it's in one of these objects, and if it is, it will return a value. And honestly, first of all, when I read that, it says the function should check if a first name is an actual contact's first name, and the given prop is a property of that contact. I had to read that like 3 times. I know that it seems like I'm an idiot, and it's because I am, but it was really complicated. So I kind of just started slowly, and I took it piece by piece. That's why I really like Paswaddle code, because you can kind of dissect it into what the sentence is saying. So what I did was, the function should check if first name is an actual contact's first name. That's kind of where I started. So I figured that since there's 0, 1, 2, 3 objects in this array, I'm going to need a for loop to iterate through the array and to get the values in each object. So I built my for loop. I set my initializer to 0, and I said this for loop can run as long as I, or 0 at the moment, is less than contacts.length, and of course first it will be. And so once this evaluated to true, I would then go to my first really important piece of code, which would be if checking for the first name. So once someone calls this function, it's going to take 2 arguments or properties or whatever, and it's going to use them as a test to return a value. So they're going to have to give me a first name and a property. My first task is to check if the first name is equal to one of the ones in my objects. So I'm going to take the first name that they give me, and I'm going to test it and see if it's equal to a first name in one of the objects that I'm on right now. So the first time that I iterate through this array, I'm obviously going to have I equal to 0. So this one right here, contacts I, is referencing the very first object in the array, basically object 0. So it's going to say, hey, is first name that you gave me, in this case it was down here, Akira, it's saying is this first name equal to the one in object 0? And the first time around it is, so that would evaluate to true. And I'm like, okay, good. Now I need to see if this same contact has a property that is equal to one in my object, or the one that was passed in to my method. And this line right here I kind of struggle with, because I have forgotten about this method that they taught us in an earlier lesson. The method has own property, which tests to see if an object has a property or not. And all we have to do is pass in the property that we're trying to test for, and it will evaluate to true or false, which is perfect for an if statement. So once I finally remembered about this method, I was able to make this work. But it took me a long time to actually remember the method. It worked. So basically it'll be the same thing. Once this line evaluates to true, it'll jump down here and say, hey, this same object, object 0, does it have a property of whatever property was passed into my method? And obviously, if that evaluates to true, it's going to go ahead and give me whatever that property was by going to that object, grabbing the property, and this will be equal to the value of it. But if it doesn't have a property like that, it's going to jump out of that if statement and it's going to return, hey, there's no such property. Now, one other thing that I had a lot of trouble with was the return statement. The last one that says no such contact. At first, before I had thought about what I was doing, I had this return statement. I had it not here, but I had it here. Because obviously I said, hey, if this first name doesn't exist, I want you to say no such contact. But what was happening was it would run once, and as long as they had passed in the first name or the name of the first object, it would evaluate to true and everything would be fine. But as soon as they changed the first name, to a property that wasn't in the first object or object 0, maybe they chose the one in the second object down here, Sherlock. If they had passed in Sherlock, this would obviously evaluate to false, and it would jump out of it and it will return no such contact. But I had to think about what happened on why I wasn't passing this challenge, and it was because as soon as an if statement or anything like that hits a return, it jumps out. So I was no longer running my for loop, so it wasn't able to check for any of the other names to try and even be true. So I had to put the return statement out of that if, and I had to put it down here, so that way my for loop would have a chance to evaluate every single name out of every single object, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't, but yeah, so my for loop needed to be able to run and test all the objects, not just the first one, and that's what it was doing by having the return statement here. As soon as it tested for object 0 and realized that Sherlock wasn't equal to the first name of that one, it returned, and as soon as it returned, it broke all the way out and it stopped the for loop and it jumped to the next task, because as soon as it hits a return, it's like, oh hey, I'm done, let me go to the next thing, and that was to do nothing. So I had to change that, and once I put it outside of the for loop, I was able to continue testing for each name and every object, and everything worked out fine. You can see that I actually passed the challenge. That was probably by far the trickiest challenge from FreeCodeCamp that I have ever faced. But I'm glad I didn't give up on it, because I'm almost done with the JavaScript at this point. Actually, I only have a few left, as you can see. I'm down here, so I am just trying to finish it up, and I'm glad that I did. And I decided to make this video because I figured I wouldn't be the only one that struggled with the profile lookup challenge, and hopefully this video helped in some way. I know I kind of did it fast, but if not, you could definitely leave some comments below, and I will try to help as best I can. Like I said, I'm just kind of learning too, and I'm surprised with myself because I know Java, and JavaScript is not as, is not really different from Java. It can be debated, but they're actually very, very similar languages. Really, this would work in Java if you instead change the var keyword to a data type. But anyways, that's beyond the point. I'm just a little bit surprised that this was that challenging for me. I guess it brings to reality how much I actually do know and how much I need to practice more. But anyways, hope this helped, and have a great day.